not blocked out.
Perfect.
Okay, good afternoon.
Good morning.
We're there already. Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Fillion. Most of you know me. Either I'm your professor or you've heard of me. I'm also the director of the Faculty Research Group on Immigrant Workers, which is sponsoring this conference that you're at today, the Global Goes Local on the social conditions of immigrant workers in Minnesota. This is the second day of our events, and we have a packed full schedule, and this is the opening act, as it were. Just again, a reminder to you all, we have free breakfast over here, bagels, coffee, cake, coffee to help you with anxiety, and the like. So don't feel like you're being rude. If you want to stand up and go over and eat, grab some food, that's what it's there for. So free lunches, free breakfasts don't come often. Speaking of free lunches, we have a free lunch at 12:30 in the Cascade Room with the keynote speaker, Saki Soni, who's going to be speaking on organizing immigrant guest workers and day laborers in the new economy. He's a dynamic organizer from the National Guest Workers Alliance, who's been organizing guest workers and day laborers in places like New Orleans, and Chicago, and Hershey, Pennsylvania, and the like. So, real excited about that. We have an exciting panel at 11 o'clock also featuring worker centers in St. Cloud and in the Twin Cities, talking about the role of immigrants in the labor movement in the United States, in Minnesota rather, and in the United States. And then we have, in addition to this student panel, we have the two final panels of this conference are all student panels. We have a panel from social work from Conseiller Thébault's class in social work, and Mary Wingard from history. Both of them had students who were actively in the field doing oral history and ethnographic work on the conditions of immigrants in the St. Cloud area, and they're going to be reporting on their findings. This particular class, Sociology 460, is called Practice and Policy, and I orient this class around the link between the practices, most notably of social movement organizations, but not only social movement organizations. It can include labor unions, can include worker centers, can include civil rights organizations, women's organizations, gay rights organizations, etc. So keep the definition very broad, but what we look at is the link between their role in organizing and in collective action, and sometimes disruptive collective action in order to change policies. And so what I wanted to feature from today's class, or from today's panel, is the way in which students from this class have engaged in the field organizations that are organizing immigrants in Minnesota and also in other parts of the country. And there's one particular talk, I'll just let you know, Sam's talk is actually not going to be speaking directly to his work in this class, but another class in which he did some really extensive interviews and field work with undocumented Mexican workers on the conditions of their work in the workplaces that they work in Stearns County, and we're thinking especially meatpacking, dairy plants, and the like. And the other two students, Emily Hearn to the far left, and Maddie to my left, will be speaking about their experiences in this class. Emily will be speaking about her research project, and Maddie will be speaking about a group project that she's involved in, and I'll let them elaborate on both. So with that, then I just like to begin with the presenters. We can go in order. Then Emily Hearn can go first, and she's going to be speaking on the topic of comparisons of organization and that organize around issues facing immigrant women. Emily.
Hello everyone, thanks for coming out today. This is a presentation about a paper in progress, so I'm not quite finished yet, but I've done a lot of interesting research so far, so that's what I'm going to lead you through today. First, just talking about workers in general, they face a lot of the similar problems, including exploitation, worksite safety, health issues, and low wages. But I wanted to look at organizations that organize immigrant women specifically, because as an immigrant woman worker, they face a lot of different obstacles when they're trying to find opportunities and find resources in America. So a problem often with immigrant women is that they are stuck with precarious work. It's work that's absolutely low wage, long hours, and systematically throughout the history of America, through free trade, through neoliberalism, through globalization, we see that immigrant women are the ones that aren't included in our reforms, that aren't included in our acts to help immigrants. They don't often have the documentation and the necessary qualifications to get into higher wage work in America. So my research questions, first I want to just look at the policy goals of different organizations. What are their policy goals to help these immigrant women workers, and what are their strategies to make sure that these policy goals are won? Next, I'm going to look at the consequences and impacts of their actions. So, are these strategies positively impacting the woman? What's happening as an unintended consequence? And then I'm going to be comparing Minnesota organizations versus California organizations. California organizations have been around a lot longer that have been organizing immigrant women, and they're also mostly based in the garment industry. And for that difference, they organize differently. And I think it's really important to look at and evaluate which strategies are helping these women the most. So there's a lot of different levels of organizing that people look towards. Some people think that it's best to start with the individual, start with families, start with local, and others think what's necessary is to go straight to federal reform, and sometimes even international. So, as I said before, it's important to evaluate which strategies have the most positive impacts on women. So Minnesota organizations, right now I just started looking at two different organizations that I noticed really do work around and work with immigrant women workers. The first is Mesa Latina, which is a fairly new organization started in 2012. They look at state and federal level reforms. They focus on collaboration, and they really are a structured organization, and they pride themselves on that structure. And then the other is La Asamblea de Derechos Civiles. This is a faith-based group that trains leaders to act in the community. Their really main goal is to look at comprehensive immigration reform. And aside from that, they have been moving lately into some smaller reforms, such as looking for driver's license as well. So Mesa Latina is an organization that really prides itself in partnering with other organizations to make a better and inclusive Minnesota. And just make sure that this is a people-centered leadership in Minnesota that fights for Latinos and makes sure that they have fair wages and also just a good life in Minnesota. And they think that to affect immigrant women the most positively means completely changing the immigration reform, making sure that they can be safe and have their rights by going and getting access to citizenship. But they also look a lot at, right now they're looking at trying to fight for driver's license for undocumented immigrants. This is a big issue for them because they think it creates safe roads and opportunities that otherwise they wouldn't have. And also, it'll stop policing of the roads and the discrimination and the unfair imprisoning of their families. Next, they also look at trying to fight for health insurance for undocumented Latinos. So they definitely look at a lot of different issues, but they are rather larger issues that don't necessarily just look at specifically women's issues. Next is La Asamblea. Asamblea is an organization that specifically looks at immigration reform, and they've been fighting for it a lot. They are not only made up of women, but they are focusing on issues that they think, again, would better the lives of immigrant women completely. And they do this through continuous pressure to the Congress. They're training voters, they're doing actions, they're making prayer vigils and to support their family that are in prison. They're always giving out phone calls, petitions, they're doing civil disobedience at district offices. So their strategy, even though they're similar to Mesa Latina in their goals, their strategies are very different. Excuse me. So next we'll look at California organizations. California organizations are different because they mostly look at organizing and local level. And these organizations are focused in the garment industry in general and also made up purely of women. So the first is Asian Immigrant Women Advocates. So the Asian Immigrant Women Advocates organization, they started off working with the garment industry, but now they moved to all low-wage sectors of work, and they definitely do a lot of different work that's all local level. The next is the Garment Worker Center. This is an organization that still only works with immigrant women in the garment industry. So AIWA, they, as I said, they always look for local level work issues. Their main focus is organizing leaders and training these leaders so that all these women have the skills and resources to organize themselves, to make sure that they can fight and speak up for their rights. And these are going to be health and safety issues, wage issues. They also look at changing community consciousness. This is where, especially, they're different from Minnesota organizations because they look at how we devalue and discriminate against non-English speakers, and that's a main focus of them. Like, how do we change the community so that everyone can feel empowered here? And then finally, they really look at improving all aspects of their lives. They don't want to just help these women as workers. They want to help them be better mothers, wives, and just to take on their own goals. Make sure that you take a day from the week and go and get education, and make sure that you feel empowered to live as your own person in America and not just go through daily routines of working and taking care of children, doing household duties. So AIWA, as I said, trains leaders and women in the community. So this organization really looks to disperse power. They do not want to be a structured organization, but rather they want to disperse power equally. They want to stay away from bureaucratic leadership and an institution that's bureaucratically led, and they really want to empower women. So they have trainings, so they have 7 levels of trainings that start from people just speaking up about their rights all the way to people doing tons of research, going all over the world, going up and speaking up and talking about these issues. This is a rather old organization, so they do have a lot of research from immigrant women. Next is the Garment Worker Center. So the Garment Worker Center is based in LA. They started in gathering and organizing. They just gathered immigrant women and they wanted to hear their experiences, what's happening in these sweatshops in the garment industry and how are they being treated. A lot of people would be working 13, 14 hours and would have to go home and still continue working. They were in terrible conditions. There was an instance where the doors and exits would be locked so that people couldn't take breaks. So they started that in 2001, and then they went on to affordable childcare. They thought these women are spending a third of their wages on childcare that's not even up to par. It's not taking good care of their children, and they're not even getting their full wages in the first place. So they thought, we have to fight for the wages for the women so that they have the ability to take care of themselves and their families, and we also have to fight for access to high conditions of childcare. Next, they looked at implementing worksite safety. As I told you, there's a lot of issues with worksite safety, especially with undocumented and any immigrant woman, because they have these dual roles and tons of roles. They have to provide for their family, they have to be a mother, they have to take care of that, and they also have to work. And what time do they have to organize? It seems like sometimes they don't have any time. And then on top of that, if they're in an unsafe site where it causes deaths, it causes sickness, they don't even have money to go to the doctor, then it's definitely something that they have to make sure that they have that access to a clean site, they have that access to health care. Finally, they looked at actions against clothing companies that use sweatshop labor. They've done this a lot recently on just trying to boycott these companies. So one of their biggest ones is boycotting Forever 21. 95% of garments from Forever 21 still are made in California through subcontracted work. And with this subcontracted work, it often means wage theft. It often means that because of this competition, women aren't getting the wages they deserve. They're not getting paid adequately. They can't even speak up because no one wants to take responsibility for them. So it's definitely an issue. So where do we go from here? As you see, all these organizations really do look at different parts of fighting for immigrant workers' rights, specifically women immigrant workers' rights, as they will affect them all. But I want to continue on looking at what are the benefits from all these different strategies they have, which have benefited them the most. And looking at identity-based organizations, if an organization is purely based on women's issues, if it's based on faith-based issues, is that deterring them from their end goal? Or is it helping them? And then finally, I want to look at local versus federal policy changes. Is it better just to keep fighting for that federal change? Is that going to help us the most? Or should we start small? Should we just build up? And I think those are just some questions that I want to keep on going from here. And then these are my references and for the photos.
Great. Very nice job. So for those of you who are wondering in the future, if you're writing a paper being written in progress, how can you possibly do a presentation on a paper that's not completed? Emily's just giving you a workshop on how it's done. So I'm looking forward to her paper. It's going to be a really great paper by the end of the semester. And I'm really glad that she could present on it at this point. Next up on the schedule is Samuel Gilbert, otherwise known as Sam. And he's going to be reporting on he's going to be reporting on from the field interviews with undocumented workers on working conditions in dairy, meatpacking, and construction sectors. And again, I should note that Sam actually did this research for another class of mine, Sociology 468, which I'll be teaching next semester, by the way. And that class is on global and social inequality. Sam?
So they don't do question. We do that at the end.
We'll do that. We'll do
Okay.
Q&A. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I started with my project. I decided to go into Stearns County area. I knew that there was a lot of undocumented immigrants and immigrants in general working in different factories. Around here we have large national factories, Jennie-O, Golden Plump, to name a few. So I had kind of an in with a friend that I knew, and so we kind of, I spoke Spanish, and so I went into, with different people, and I kind of used like a snowball sample and to get my interviews. And talking to them about working conditions, I looked back and I went through my interviews, and it's funny how that wasn't necessarily the focus of my paper, which it should have been. I had a lot of the information, but I really didn't talk about it that much. So I kind of went back and looked at really what were the actual issues facing immigrants, and what she mentioned, I'm actually going to highlight a little bit about policy at the end of this, because that actually was within my scope as well. I talked about, so when I asked them about like their working conditions, it was interesting because the older generation interviewees, the people who had kids or had children who moved here initially, all of them had not been documented at one point. So whether they had documentation now as I was interviewing them, all of them at one point didn't when they came. And at that time, a lot of the factories didn't care. They're just like, there was a story that a woman told me is she forgot her social security number, her fake one, and she just spoke it out. She's like, I think it's this, and they're like, close enough, you're good to go. And that was sort of the way it was done 20, 25, 30 years ago. And through a lot of reform done, they really changed those laws, and they really cracked down on social security numbers having to be valid. So it really changed. If a person was undocumented and then they received papers, they were able to still keep working at that factory. But if they hadn't received papers, they were pushed to the farmlands of Melrose, New Munich, those areas. So that was kind of an interesting find, as well as when the older generation workers, when they talk about their work, they come with a lot more gratitude too, and I think that can be almost a hindrance, because they are some of them were very strongly against even any reform. Or I asked them about immigrant rights or what they want, and they said, we make not very much, and I'll talk about the working conditions, but they were poor in general, but they're much better than they were in Mexico, and they have much better wages. For them, $10, $12 an hour. When they first started, around $9, that was unreal to them. So I think there's a misconception too that they are all really fighting for change, when the people that I interviewed were actually pretty grateful for where they were compared to where they had been. I mean, they fought really hard to get here, to get their family here, to support their family. A lot of the parents are like, we'll do whatever it takes for our kids to go to school, to get an education, to live and survive. So I think they have, the people I interviewed at least, had a different perspective than I had expected it to be. I thought they'd be like, wow, this is horrible. But that wasn't necessarily the case at all times. And then I talked to some of the younger generation of Latinos who, a couple of them were undocumented. One of them was actually born here, but their whole family was undocumented. And it was interesting because when he actually highlighted a lot of the issues that are going on in the workplace. A story that he had mentioned to me was in Golden Plump specifically, in Jennie-O specifically, they have an X amount that they need to, the production number that needs to be met every day. And when they get hired on, they get told, okay, it's 20,000 turkeys, I believe. But what they end up actually doing is 60,000. They do triple the amount, is the real production amount that they're going for. So they actually make them do triple the work, and if they don't like it, they can just go find something else. And so then they'll just find somebody else to do their job. He talked about not being able to go to the bathroom or have any breaks because when they wore their outfits, or he described it as like an outfit, it was so hard to take off, and they're like these big suits, and to take them off, and the bathrooms were like strategically really far away, and they only have like a 5 to 7 minute break to go to the bathroom, and it takes like that amount of time just to get the garment off, or the outfit off, and then put it back on. So they would get reprimanded every time they go to the bathroom because they were exceeding the amount of time that they were allowed. So he had mentioned, his first like couple of weeks, his body wasn't used to it, so he'd have to like pee within his like outfit and then go home and just change it after, which sounds crazy, but he just talked about like it was normal, like he was like, oh, it is what it is. But so those are kind of the working conditions that one of my interviewees mentioned. Also, depending on, as the day went on, if they, in Genio specifically, or in Golden Pump, I think they both do this, if as the day goes on they're not meeting their like hourly amount as they get to the end, if it's midday and they're substantially behind, they cut everybody's lunch hours and breaks so that they can make sure that they get all the work done. And a lot of the workers some of them don't even know that is not okay. A lot of them are like, well, we gotta get the work done. They have it instilled in them that they have to get the work done, so it makes sense to them why they shouldn't have a break. And this one interview, he's younger, his dad worked with him, and he told his dad, he's like, you deserve a break, and his dad's like, no, we need to get the work done. Like, this is what it's meant to be. And I think that's maybe a generational gap too, is the fathers or the older people are much more willing to listen to the commands of the authority and just go along with it, versus the younger generation of immigrant workers, which I thought was kind of interesting, because he was highlighting, he's like, this was fucked up, and he was like getting all pissed. He was telling his dad, you need to like stand up, and his dad's like, no, we fought to get here, we're grateful to be here, and you're gonna sit here and attack the hand that's feeding us, basically. What's that? Oh. So that was kind of an interesting, as I went back through, find. And then one of my other interviewees mentioned the power of language that the company uses against them. For example, they put all like the Spanish-speaking workers together on the line so that they can make sure that they're doing the work efficiently, and that they have like somebody to talk to, so to know exactly what to do or how to do things, so that they're not completely out of the know. And I think on top of it, I think from a sociological perspective, I think they probably do it too so that they're not really learning English as a way to kind of keep them out of the know. I think English is a way for them to then maybe get another job, to get a higher paying job or a job with more benefits. And some of the workers who have been in the United States for 15 years don't know a lick of English, because when they go to work, they're surrounded by Spanish speakers, it's comfortable, and they're able to get the job done efficiently. But then what happens is, if there are like bilinguals, especially the younger generation of immigrants, most of the time speak English and Spanish, they get hired to be like the middleman. They get hired to be like the managers or the supervisors. So I think it's strategic on the management end, because then they have the ins to what the workers are saying and what's going on the front lines. But also it's a way to keep those people into their company. These bilingual speakers could be interpreters, they could be working their way up in different fields. Most of them are educated, but it keeps them within their company, and they can use that as this title of, oh, I'm a supervisor, they make like $1 more or $2 more, and then that actually keeps them there for 10 years, when really they're still making not that much as a supervisor. So I get some of the working conditions that I also could highlight that they had mentioned in their interviews was that oftentimes the working environment was extremely cold, really loud, smelly. Somebody said that they were long hours and they didn't know when they would go home. Sometimes they would have an 8-hour day, which would be stretched to a 10, 12-hour day because the production numbers weren't being met. Then they have to do all the sanitation and all that stuff after. So all the cleaning, all that still had to be done, and so they couldn't leave till 12 hours after. And most of the interviewees lived in Melrose area, and they commuted to Wilmer and St. Cloud. So they were commuting quite a ways to get home. There was pretty much no benefits. You had mentioned no benefits in yours, or like lack of benefits. One of the women that I interviewed, she was injured on site, and they just gave her like a $2,000 payout, and that's like a lot of money to, I think, a Mexican immigrant. Like, okay, perfect, yep. Like, they don't know that that's like kind of odd that they don't get any health care, because in Mexico, that was few and far between as well. Healthcare, dental, things that we find to be normal here. These companies they know that these people aren't asking for it or demanding it. So it's not happening. Healthcare is pretty much obsolete. Dental doesn't exist, and they just get these payouts. Like if they get injured on site, here's $2,000 and good luck. And they take it. They really don't give any sick days. One of the interviewees worked there for like 7 years and hadn't taken one sick day, and asked for one, and they got in trouble. And they didn't get paid for, because most jobs, if you have a sick day, it's accrued in your hours, and you can take a sick day, and they don't do it that way. So those are just some differences. Oftentimes they couldn't take lunch breaks, they mentioned. So a lot of them had to eat big breakfasts. They were used to like getting up early and having a large breakfast to sustain them throughout the day. I think also in terms of policy, I think on one hand you have the Minnesota people, or like the Americans who really aren't on board with immigrant rights, but then you also have immigrants who are here, who I have interviewed, who don't really feel that they should deserve more. I think there's this sense of gratitude that they have, and don't feel like, oh, by me demanding more, or by me demanding livable wages in the U.S. or healthcare or dental insurance or any sort of insurance is against, like, they feel like they're biting the hand that's feeding them. And I think it's getting through that's not necessarily the case, but for your future generation, it's important that we all stand together and fight for immigrant rights, and knowing, yes, this was better than Mexico, but we can get more, and you deserve more. I think that was an interesting find, and even the fact it gendered. I think the women that I interviewed, a lot of them were undocumented versus the men, and I think the men did that as a strategy, the Mexican men, to keep their women within their house and they wouldn't leave. A lot of the women talked about how they felt like they lived in a prison because they were trapped. If they left, they were fearful of ICE coming and taking them away. So a lot of the men, even within their culture, do it as a control. And so the women, on one hand, they're in kind of a rock and a hard place. I think they are trying to work if they need to, or if their family needs money, but oftentimes they're also faced with a lot of abuse at home, and they can't really get independent because they don't have enough education to kind of break away from that abusive situation or go on their own. So it's sort of, it's getting through to in empowering the immigrant women and immigrant men, younger generations, and empowering them to demand change and to see the injustices that they're facing. At times, I think it's tricky when it's masked by like gratitude or feeling like I can't go against the hand that's fed me. So I don't know. That was what I learned in my interviews. It was a good experience, and I learned a lot about. I've humanized immigrants in Stearns County and seen them as people who are doing the best that they can, and with what they have. And these women are incredibly strong to hang in there, but there's a long way to go, and I've recognized that. So
Very nice. Sam didn't mention it, but the reason why he was able to do so many of these interviews with undocumented Mexican workers is because he's fluent in Spanish. So,
I said that.
did
We
you?
did, yeah.
Oh, I wasn't paying attention. Bad professor. Okay, well, good, I'm glad you did mention that. Maybe I was taking photos while you said it.
It's all good.
It is good. Very, very nice. Thank you, Sam. And then our last presenter is Madeline Wegner, and she's going to be presenting. She's also in our 460 class this semester, and she's going to be reporting on a group project that she's involved in, entitled "In the Field: Mobilizing Support for Immigrant Refugee Organizing Meatpacking Workers."
Yeah, so within the 460 class, it's about social policy and practice, and just breaking that down, we're looking at how social policy is actually put into effect in different ways that we can organize specifically low-wage workers and immigrant workers in order to make sure that policies are put in that will benefit them and help them, but also that the practice of those policies follows through with our goals. So our group right now, we are currently working with Ahmed from the Greater Minnesota Workers Center, which is Central Minnesota based, and they help organize and mobilize low-wage workers, and so we're kind of piggybacking off of that with Ahmed. But right now we're planning, it's a bunch of things. It's a mix of a rally and a memorial and a press conference, but it's for workers at GMP. For PR reasons, it's called GMP, formerly known as Golden Plump. But right now we're working on organizing immigrant workers for this rally and organizing people in the St. Cloud community, specifically the SDSU community, to attend this rally to give a list of demands to GMP Corporate, which is near Crossroads Mall in St. Cloud. So Sam had mentioned a lot of the working conditions that people face at Jennie-O, and same with Golden Plump. Ahmed was telling us a story just the other day about a man who works at Golden Plump, and wake up call, a lot of our meat is dipped in chemicals, but he ended up getting a chemical spill in his eye. So he went to the nurse at work, and what ended up happening is the nurse rinsed out his eyes and said, "Go home, come back tomorrow, we'll see how you're feeling." So he comes back tomorrow, his eyes are all red, and it's obvious that they're messed up from this chemical spill in his eyes. And he's like, "Yeah, it's not really getting better, my eyes still hurt, they're red." And the nurse said, "Well, I think you got that somewhere else. You probably didn't get that here." And he was like, "You treated me, you washed out my eyes. Like, as a nurse, it is your job to report that this happened." And so there's obviously a lot of mistreatment, and especially in the safety and health violations. Sam mentioned the bathroom thing. There's also religious discrimination, where people aren't given the allocated time to pray, depending on what their religion is. And like Sam also mentioned, people, it's hard to organize when you're a worker who needs to work at this place, and when they easily fire people because they have very unfair hiring and firing practices. It's very difficult to find the time to organize and have the means to organize. And so that's where places like Greater Minnesota Workers Center, and what we're hoping our group can do, can come in and kind of help fill that role of mobilizing them and helping them organize and teaching them skills that they can use and share with other workers in the future so that they're able to get the safety that they need and able to get the wages that they need and able to get anything that a worker deserves. So as far as organizing goes, because it's a student group project, we are really focusing on our niche as students because we have such a rich community of people that are willing to do things on campus. So one of the biggest things we're doing is reaching out to student organizations that we think would be interested in mobilizing their groups and other networks they may have to come to the rally. So just to name a few, SOS Club, Students Organized for Change, is a club I'm the co-chair of. Emily is the other co-chair. Sam was the previous president. It's a lot of sociology students, but also from other majors too. But we're working with our group and planning to have whoever can come from our group come. We have the People's Collective. We're reaching out to the College Democrats. We're also reaching out to International Workers of the World, Future Educators Club, and then also just different cultural orgs like the Muslim Student Association and the Hmong Student Organization, and then also MECA, and then also Social Responsibility Club, SRSO. Another big thing is Unite Cloud. I don't know if anyone's familiar with them, but they do a lot of work, mostly working on improving relationships in St. Cloud specifically with immigrants and other people that live here, and just making sure that people feel included and there's open discussions, and we're hoping to reach out to them too. Another big thing, aside from organizing these groups, is we're reaching out to a lot of our classes that we have with people. But honestly, I think reaching out to the other organizations is the best organizing we can do, because you go to one group and because they're already organized and they already have the numbers, they're able to pull from their networks. So we've broken down our group into committees just so we can be more organized, and so we can make sure that each little job gets done. So one of our main groups is people that are meeting with these groups. But then we also have a few people working on a PowerPoint presentation to present to our class and to other people that might be interested. And then myself and Sam, we're in the public relations group. So we're, all next week we're going to be tabling. I've been handing out flyers after the Global Goes Local events, and we'll be making signs for the event themselves. One of the biggest struggles as far as holding a memorial or a rally or a press conference is getting people committed to go, because people are busy. It's easy to write something off if you don't have a hard commitment or if someone doesn't think it's that important. But each event that organizers hold or each press conference, everybody counts and everybody is important. And so one thing that we're working on doing is making sure that we get hard commitments from people. So we have a sign-up sheet in hopes that people will give us their email and or phone number so we can contact them and remind them. And just by simply having them write something down on paper, it kind of makes that hard commitment where it's like, I've written my name down, I have officially committed. And we're also hoping to organize carpools so that we can bring people over to the rally, because another big difficulty of organizing is, okay, what if someone doesn't have the means to come to this rally / memorial / press conference? What if someone doesn't have the ability to physically get there? The more that we can plan ahead and the more that we can have a day of schedule, the more likely things will run smoothly, the more likely people will be able to go, we'll get them there, the more likely our event will be successful and these immigrants, specifically immigrant workers, but it's other types of workers too at Golden Plump right now, be able to get more rights, better conditions. So just to give all of you a little bit of information before I finish up on the rally, if any of you are interested in coming, which I highly recommend all of you come. The slogan of it right now is kind of mourn for the dead and fight for the living. So many people have died in the meatpacking plant. So this will kind of like be a day of a memorial, but then also we have to keep fighting for the people that are working there right now, because obviously we want to completely eliminate work-related deaths in the meatpacking industry. So at the day of, it's going to be April 28th, which is a Thursday. It's going to be starting at 11 a.m. and I think it will go to about 1. And then it's going to be on 2nd Street in St. Cloud, kind of by Crossroads. It's at the GMP corporate office. We also have reached out to the press a little bit too. We've reached out to UTVS on campus. One of our group members is friends with the program director at KVSC, so he's reaching out to him. And yeah, it's a lot of organizing and a lot of aspects, and there's a lot of difficulty in figuring out how everything will fit together and run smoothly. And the hardest part about organizing is just planning and getting people to show up. So if any of you are interested in going, I do have flyers out there that I highly recommend you pick up, and even if not for yourself or you know you can't go that day, give it to your friends, show it to your classes. Grassroots organizing, I'm a strong believer in bottom-up organizing, and you may think you can't make a difference, but this is an easy way locally where you can just show up, and just you being there will make a huge difference for a lot of workers. So anyway, there's a sign-up sheet where you can give us your name and or email, phone number. And yeah, the flyers are blue. They look like this. Sam and I will be tabling next week, so if you have any more questions, you have an idea, you want to get involved, you can contact us next week. We'll be tabling in Atwood. But yeah, we're really excited and we hope our event is successful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to editorialize a little bit here. Maddie didn't mention it, but I am one of the co-chairs of the Greater
Yes.
Minnesota Workers Center. And we also have Ahmed here, Ahmed Ali, who's the organizer, the staff organizer, who's organizing this event, and he can also speak to the challenges of getting people out for actions. And I think that what I'm really encouraged about is that this is an action that is addressed to the ongoing struggles of immigrant workers who are themselves taking stands and fighting for their rights in the meatpacking industry. I think too often on our college campus, we get caught up in a lot of discussions around multiculturalism, anti-racism, diversity, and the like, and all these are really very important things, obviously, but very often, sometimes they're too focused on how these issues play themselves out on the campus and how they affect students, and we forget about the way in which these issues also are affecting whole communities that we have very little contact with because we're here on this campus, but who are suffering in ways that are unimaginable to us on the assembly lines, in meatpacking plants, and in printing companies, and cleaning agencies and the like, maintenance workers who are experiencing real struggles that if we're not addressing those ones as well as the ones that are affecting students, then our whole idea about multiculturalism really is a very kind of a narrow one, and almost I would say kind of selfish. And so I think that I'm really encouraged that what Maddie's group is doing is something that reflects a more well-rounded or comprehensive sense of the notions of diversity and multiculturalism that extend to the way in which these affect working class people, especially newly arrived immigrants. So, yeah, they're doing good work. I'm really proud of the work they've done in this class. With that, we'll open up to Q&A. You can feel free to, of course, throw any questions. A good number of you are here from my theory class. You can feel free to throw any kind of theoretical questions at these three, because these are 3-star students from my social theory class. I think we have a D-, an F+,
And I failed because I didn't eat the food.
You failed because you didn't eat the food. So
Eat the food, people. It goes to waste if you don't eat it.
we don't want that. So okay, but okay, Bailey, go ahead.
Okay, so when you're working with and trying to organize a group of people that don't have time to organize, often feel grateful for what they're getting, and don't feel like they have the ability to speak up, how do you avoid the savior complex?
I know that a lot of the workers will be involved. The man that I mentioned, who Ahmed had told us about with the chemical spill, he will be speaking at the event. And the Greater Minnesota Workers Center has been working with the people to decide what they want their goals are and what they want to be like their demands. And so I think the biggest thing is open communication. I think another part of it too is organizing and mobilizing rather than being the voice of righteousness and the voice of reason. It's about organizing and it's about mobilizing workers and teaching them skills. It's not about saying things that we think they want and think they deserve. It's about open communication and figuring out what they want, what they feel comfortable with asking for. And it's all about organizing. It's not about swooping in with some white flag and taking over. And I think that's the other difficult part about organizing is avoiding that aspect. You don't want to be someone like me as a college white student who has not worked in a meatpacking industry. I don't want to be like, I know what you deserve, I know what you want because I'm a little white girl student who knows everything. That's not the case. It's about organizing and mobilizing people that don't have the time or don't have the skills and need support from Greater Minnesota Workers Center.
And I think that even when you go out and talk to workers, when you try to organize workers, some of them, of course, aren't going to speak. They don't want to speak up. But for the people that do, when we give them that opportunity, they generally take it. A lot of people do want to talk about the issues. Even if they don't feel comfortable just yet speaking out, having them to contribute and talk about the issues is the first level of getting them to start really thinking about what's going on there. So I think just starting that conversation is the best way to help them realize themselves what they want and what they want to do.
I think Sam wants to say something, but I'm gonna just add to what they said, pieces of information that are really great. We will be going there, supporting them, rather than doing things for them. They are already fighting this battle, and we will be acting as their allies. We don't want them to feel they are alone in this fight. We want them to know they have friends, and these are the friends here. So, and they are fighting with their, with their actions and with their deeds and their words. They are speaking with the media about the issues. They are doing surveys, and they are helping us reach, their co-workers for data collection, and also to explain to us the things that happen at the floor. But they are also holding the company accountable. They are talking to their bosses, the supervisors, and the plant managers when they have meetings, and when they are as individuals. And so they are already fighting. They are already organizing themselves, and we will be helping them because we want to show force when we show our own work tomorrow day.
I was gonna say that also in terms of like with generationally speaking, I think the younger generation of immigrants that I know are very much like educating them, like within their own group are educating like their parents and about the systems. They know like the American system a little bit better as they've grown up here. I think the parents don't know that they deserve a break. Like they don't like they would like one, and so it's kind of also it's within their community, knowing the bureaucratic system and educating themselves on the way in which corporate works. I think that's a tricky thing, and it's not going in and going, okay, we know what you want or don't want. But I think the younger generation actually is doing a really good job of talking to their parents about things, because I think a lot of times the parents are like, yeah, this does seem a little funky, and money is tight, and yes, I'm grateful because I have it, but they know that there's a lot of injustices too, so they want some change too. It's just being like, okay, it's okay to step out there, and by being allies, it allows their voices to be heard, and allow them to speak up for what they actually do want. So it's tricky. It's good.
I have a question about the working conditions. You said that if they weren't on track to meet their quotas during the day,
Yep.
they would get their lunch breaks cut. Was that like the actual quota or the tripled?
The triple quota. That's
Okay.
it, yeah. So what they often would like, and depending on where you worked within the factory, one of the guys, he was one of the people who was up on this. The way he described it was like on the when the semis come with like or they had like all these turkeys, they're like shoveling them off the delivery. Yeah, that's and like they go up this. They like are levied up or lifted up, and they're having to throw them up. And if you're not getting them on time, it's like they'll find somebody else. And so they make it so that they actually increase the speed to make sure the quotas are being met. So if you're going too slow, like they keep speeding it up, so you're being lifted higher and higher, quicker and quicker. So you're trying to constantly be shoveling the thousands of turkeys off of the ramp as quickly as you can. And it's all about making the maximum amount of profit within the day, and they pride themselves on that, and then they pride the workers on that. They go, you guys did triple the amount, so high fives to you. It's like, and they're like, thank you, like I feel accomplished, like I did a lot, and not seeing the injustice behind that they're working triple the amount of time for what they humanly should be,
And not being compensated.
and not being compensated for it. Yeah.
Me or?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to ask you something you said, Emily, towards the end of your slide or the presentation. I really like that you mentioned like identity-based organizations, and kind of you left it with, are they good, are they bad? And when you said that, it made me think of like religious organizations versus like you said, identity organizations. And when you talked about the one in California that was a little bit more powerful because it was older, they had more research and all of that. How can you, like, what do you think in terms of like in Minnesota and how there's a huge Somali population, and then there's, you know, Latin American immigrants, like especially kind of during, you know, you touched on that when you said you speak fluent Spanish, so you could talk to a lot of the workers in all these like factory type, you know, low wage situations. Do you think that, are there any, I don't know, so this is kind of a question for everybody if you guys know, but do you think there are organizations that work towards helping, you know, like specific groups that, do they do better, you know what I mean? Do you think that based on
Do
that,
better in terms of
are they more
only
efficient, like
being by themselves versus
yeah, like
being,
versus immigrant workers or Somali immigrant workers or, you know, Mexican immigrant workers? Like, is there, I know there's the workforce, you guys talked about.
The Worker Center.
The Worker Center, yeah, but then like, are there other organizations that are more powerful? Because it really, it kind of resonated when you said that the Asian immigrant women, yeah, like it was really powerful because they were older, they had more research, and they have all this like, kind of, you know, they had roots in the community. So do you think that like is there some kind of organization in Minnesota that has like these roots, that has this kind of history or like research that's like kind of compiled a database basically? That
Well, so I haven't looked at all the organizations in Minnesota. There are a lot of them. I only looked at 2, right? There's a lot of different organizations that have been here for a while, but most of them are just getting started. There have been some that have been here, you know, since 1980s, maybe even before, but in general, what we see in Minnesota is a lot of smaller organizations that do work with a certain community, but they collaborate with others. So we see a lot of different Christian organizations and Muslim organizations collaborating and making sure that we're going to support each other in this fight. We're all low-wage workers. We all need to have each other's backs. And so a lot of them, when they do collaborate with those types of issues, it definitely impacts the whole community. And so when you think about this question, is it better to collaborate or is it better just to look at your own specific issue? You know, are you going to try to make sure that your issue is maybe a smaller, more like specific issue is going to go further, or are you going to like look at all different issues and try to make sure that they all go together, that maybe a larger reform is put in place? And even I don't know that yet, that's why I'm doing research, and even when I finish this research project, there's going to be tons of unanswered questions. But when you ask like which one's more efficient, which one's more impactful, what I'm looking at is I'm going to look at like news articles and everything and see, okay, so we see that they did this. Now what happened from this? Were they given their rights? In a couple years were they taken away? What actions came back after? So like sometimes people speak out and then their work hours are cut to basically zero in the next week. So if we see, and then what did we do to step up and fix that again? All these questions are definitely important. I'm sorry I can't give you like a direct answer, but this is what I'm doing to try to find out, and it's just examining like the actions. Yeah.
I think I can address some of this question because one, we have the Greater Minnesota Worker Center in St. Cloud doing something that's new in St. Cloud, which is actually creating a consciousness of organizing workers. And in St. Cloud, one of the reasons why we put together this organization, and one of the reasons I put together this conference starting 7 years ago, was to start to generate a consciousness around organizing immigrants, and not just talking about immigrants as victims, but organizing, but as people who, just like past generations of immigrants, have organized in order to advance themselves individually and as groups. And they've all done that by getting involved in the labor movement in one way or another. I mean, it doesn't matter what group you're talking about. But in terms of in Minnesota, the most dynamic, most powerful or empowering organization, if you ask me, is this organization called CETUL, which in Spanish is the Centro de Trabajadores de la Lucha, or en Lucha, I can't remember. But in any event, it translates into Workers in Struggle, or Center for Workers in Struggle. And coming back to your identity question, their name is CETUL, and it's in Spanish. In English we say CETUL, of course, not CETUL, right? But you might think, well, oh, that's an organization that is focused exclusively on immigrant and Latino workers. But in fact, it's mainly because their focus in the last, when they got started, like the last 7, 8 years, has been on janitorial workers in the Twin Cities. And those workers are almost exclusively, but not exclusively, but almost exclusively Latino and many undocumented and Spanish speaking. And so they've done, the majority of their organizing has been primarily focused on Spanish speaking, and all their organizers speak fluent Spanish. But now they've also begun to expand into other areas like fast food organizing and retail organizing, retail workers organizing. And so these workers are not only not necessarily immigrants, but they're native born, they're African American, Caucasian, Latino, but Latino native born. And so their organizing has gone beyond the scope of purely identity-based organizing. And so there's a point at which that type of organizing has its strengths and then it has its limits. And CETUL is actually going to be on the next panel, and at least one or two of their workers are also going to be on the panel. I should say one of their members, who's a worker in the janitorial field, is going to be speaking on that panel, and Ahmed will be the other person on this panel. And Saket Soni, who's the keynote speaker, who does organizing of guest workers around the country, will be the facilitator of that conversation. So that's what's going to be on board actually in the next panel if you're available for it. But I think, to come back to your question, every organization has to be very aware of and sensitive to identity-based issues. But if they get, for lack of a better way of putting it, stuck on that, they can really narrow their scope of what possible outcomes they can generate. And at some point, I think like Maddie was saying, and Emily was also saying, and I think Sam was also saying, all groups, especially ones that are fighting oppressive conditions in the workplace, need allies. And it's just a question of now, when you are playing that role as an ally, are you going there as the superhero, or are you just going there to just quietly show support? I can remember one time, many moons ago, 10 moons ago, when my first year of teaching here, I was teaching a graduate class to students in a theory class on social responsibility. And the sociology class, but it was a social responsibility program. And so these are students who typically think of themselves as very progressive, very enlightened, and more enlightened than other students and the like. And it's good that they have these illusions about themselves. You know, it's good to feel good about yourself. But I would tell them about, you know, at the time, this was 10 years ago, the booming immigrant rights movement and the amazing, stunning, I should say stunning from the perspective of those who weren't following what was going on in immigrant communities at that time, but the millions of immigrants who came out on the streets in LA, in Houston, in Chicago, in Washington DC, in New York City. I mean, some of these cities had like 2 million people marching, and almost all of them were people who were literally risking, you know, deportation or being, you know, rounded up. If there was ever an opportune time to, as it were, round up undocumented immigrants, that was it. And it really kind of exposed the contradiction of this whole notion of undocumented, documented so-called illegal legal business, right? Because it really is just a game that's used to divide and conquer and to intimidate immigrants. But 10 years ago, you know, I remember, you know, talking to students about those marches because they just occurred, and one of the students said, you know, well, what would I do? What would I do if I went? You know, and I could see that her point of confusion was because she was very caught up in diversity stuff in her high school and teaching this stuff and the like, and you can see that kind of, to use, I think, Bailey's phrase, the kind of the white savior or the savior complex, right? You know, and I said, well, geez, it's real simple. I said, you just walk. I said, you don't do anything. I said, it's not your march. You just walk. You don't say anything. You just listen, walk. I said, so you're a body. You're one more body. I said, what's the point of a march? What's the point of a protest, a picket? The power in numbers, right? I said, so you show up and you just show support. That's all you have to do. You don't have to say anything. No, unless someone asks you to say something. Right? But there's no need. That's it. But yeah, the SATOOL is probably not only the most dynamic worker center in Minnesota, who we've kind of modeled ourselves after. I don't mean to say we're copying and pasting their approach, because you can't. We're St. Cloud and they're Minneapolis. We don't have the resources they have in Minneapolis like we do here in St. Cloud. Maybe someday we will. But I would say of all the organizations, SATOOL is the most dynamic and organized workers organization in Minnesota, and I would also say in the Midwest, and it's fair to say, broadly speaking, in the United States. So we have those kind of organizations here in Minnesota, and SATOOL is one of them. I think we may have, no, actually we don't, it's 10:45, and my students like to remind me, this class ends at 10:45, not 10:50. So, thank you very much for a good audience, and if you have a chance to stick around for other panels or our keynote speaker, and we have free lunch at 12:30.
Very delicious.
Very delicious, ask Maddie.
Yes.
So this is all, that's going to be in the Cascade room at 12:30. So, and right here at 11 we're doing the next panel.
And the flyers are out there on the corner of the table. I highly recommend that you grab one and sign your name and email or number, please.
You can hang around for the next one. I really love you. I really love having you here.